there are going to be some extremely close races this year. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about my picks and predictions for this year's Oscars. There are 54 films nominated across 23 categories, and just like the last few years, I had the opportunity to see every nominee. In fact, I finished them up a few weeks ago, which is definitely the earliest I've managed so far. I do my Oscar predictions a little differently than most people, so I want to explain what I'm going to do here. Basically, for each category, I'm going to give you two picks. The first is my personal pick. It's the choice that I think was the best or most deserving, and would be my vote if I actually had a vote. The second pick that I'm going to give you is the choice that I think will actually win. This will take into account not only the quality of the film, but also other contributing factors like the demographic makeup of the voting body or current events. So basically, this is a should win, will win scenario. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. Remember, these are just my predictions, so be sure to post your own personal predictions for the 2023 Oscars in the comments below. I've already reviewed many of these movies on this channel, so if you want to check those out for some more in-depth thoughts on each of them, I'll put links in the description below and also link some of them up in the cards as we go along. I've also done a 23 video short series ranking the films of each of the 23 Oscars categories, so I'll post the link to that playlist in the description as well. Alright, let's get into the predictions. We'll go in the order that the categories were presented in last year, and I'll put chapter shortcuts in the description to make it a bit easier to navigate. Actress in a supporting role. The nominees are Angela Bassett in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Hong Chow in The Whale, Carrie Condon in The Banshees of Inisherin, Jamie Lee Curtis in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Stephanie Hsu in Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is a really interesting mix of nominees this year, with a variety of performance types. We've got kind of a regal performance from Angela Bassett, and then a mix of comedy and pathos from all the rest. While I thought they were all pretty good, Hong Chow and Stephanie Hsu are the two that have continued to really stand out to me, even on rewatch. But of those two, I've got to go with Stephanie Hsu for my personal pick. Unfortunately, I don't think she's actually going to win, and although this race is kind of a toss-up right now, I think Carrie Condon is going to end up taking the Oscar home. Sound. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: The Way of Water, The Batman, Elvis, and Top Gun: Maverick. Even though it's been a few years now, it still throws me off that sound has been condensed into just a single category. If we still had our two different sound categories, then I think it would be a little easier to choose between these nominees. Some of them are really strong on the sound design side, while others are stronger on the sound editing side. But combined, it's a little harder to pick. I thought All Quiet on the Western Front was really strong on this front, but I've got to go with Top Gun: Maverick for my personal pick. And even though I think All Quiet on the Western Front may give it a run for its money, I think Top Gun: Maverick is actually going to win too. Cinematography. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Bardo: False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths, Elvis, Empire of Light, and Tar. Cinematography is always one of my favorite categories, but for the past couple years, I've been a little disappointed by some of the nominees, and it seems like that trend continues here. It's not so much that I think some of the lesser nominees are bad, it's just that there were other films that I'm surprised weren't nominated instead. But of the nominees, I've definitely got to go with All Quiet on the Western Front for my personal pick. I don't think things are going to be quite as clear-cut for who's actually going to win, though. I have a feeling it's going to come down to either All Quiet on the Western Front or Elvis, but I'm going to give the slight edge to All Quiet on the Western Front. It's going to be close between them, I think, but the battlefield scope and scale will tip the scales. Documentary short subject. The nominees are The Elephant Whisperers, Haul Out, How Do You Measure a Year, The Martha Mitchell Effect, and Stranger at the Gate. For some reason, it seems like my taste in short films, especially the documentary shorts, is always a little bit off from the Academy's taste, and I suspect that's probably going to be the case again this year. For me, there were only two nominees that I truly enjoyed, Haul Out and The Martha Mitchell Effect. Haul Out was a sparse but interesting conservation tale, and The Martha Mitchell Effect was a slightly more traditionally told history documentary. Very different topics and styles, which makes it a little hard to choose between them, but I'm gonna go with The Martha Mitchell Effect for my personal pick. I have to admit that I'm a little unsure of how the Academy is gonna vote on this one. I'm a little nervous that they might stray towards the very misguided Stranger at the Gate, given some of their past winning selections, but I have a feeling they're probably going to go with The Elephant Whisperers. Not only is it a fairly positive story, with baby elephants, but it was also the most widely distributed of the nominees, which, for a relatively underseen category, makes a big difference. Visual effects. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: The Way of Water, The Batman, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and Top Gun: Maverick. I'm usually a little torn with my selection for this category, since there are often some unusual nominee selections, but this year, visual effects is probably the category I'm actually most confident about. In fact, it almost feels like an unfair category this year. All the nominees had some good effects, but Avatar: The Way of Water is just in a completely different league. The effects were really impressive in the first film back in 2009, and things have only improved since then. The motion capture, impressive environments, an almost entirely CG visual production make Avatar my personal pick, but also the film I think's actually gonna win as well. I would be absolutely amazed if it didn't. Animated feature film. The nominees are Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, The Sea Beast, and Turning Red. Looking back on last year in terms of animated films, I'm realizing just how sparse things were. We obviously had some good films, most of which being these nominees, but it's definitely not the strongest slate of nominees we've ever had. Now, I personally enjoyed all 5 of these movies, and I know that I liked Turning Red a bit more than the average person did, but I've got to give my personal pick to Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. To be perfectly honest, I feel like its qualification as an animated film is a little iffy. I get it, stop motion is definitely animation, but this is very much a split animated live action film in that regard. Also, it's a 2021 movie, but whatever. For the actual winner, I think it's going to come down to Marcel and Pinocchio. Despite both incorporating stop motion animation, they're pretty different movies, and I think the dark fantasy that Guillermo del Toro brings to Pinocchio is going to push it towards the win. Animated short film. The nominees are The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, The Flying Sailor, Ice Merchants, My Year of Dicks, and An Ostrich Told Me the World is Fake and I Think I Believe It. Okay, well this was a hugely improved set of nominees compared to last year. The only film that I thought was on the weak side was The Flying Sailor, but I thought all the rest of them ranged from decent to pretty good. Ice Merchants had a really interesting animation style and an impactful ending, but I've gotta give my personal pick to An Ostrich Told Me the World is Fake and I Think I Believe It. Ridiculous mouthful of a name, but I loved the meta approach this short took to its stop motion animation style. I suppose Ice Merchants might have an outside shot, and it would certainly be fun to hear them announce My Year of Dicks as the winner, but I think The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse is gonna actually take home the Oscar. The animation is certainly great for it, but I think it's the very on-the-nose, saccharine, life lesson-filled story that'll win over the voters. Actor in a supporting role. The nominees are Brendan Gleeson in The Banshees of Inisherin, Brian Tyree Henry in Causeway, Judd Hirsch in The Fabelmans, Barry Keoghan in The Banshees of Inisherin, and Ke Huy Quan in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I tend to have a tough time judging the acting categories in general, but especially the supporting categories. And while I thought the actress in a supporting role category was about as tough to judge as usual this year, I feel pretty strongly and confidently about the actor in a supporting role category. For me, this one is a no-brainer, and I'm definitely going with Ke Huy Quan for my personal pick. I thought his performance was great. Not only did he have multiple roles in the story, but he delivered them with both humor and heart. I'm so glad that he's come back to acting, and I think the Academy is going to agree with me and give him the Oscar for this one. International feature film. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Argentina 1985, Close, EO, and The Quiet Girl. This category is not at all what I anticipated it to be only a few months ago. I thought for sure that RRR and Decisional Leave were both going to make it in and battle it out for the Oscar. Instead, we've got neither of them. That said, I enjoyed 4 of the 5 nominees, and really enjoyed 2 of them. But as much as I liked Close, I've got to give my personal pick to All Quiet on the Western Front. It takes an already impactful story and turns it into something even more harrowing and visceral. Likewise, I think it's also probably going to actually win. EO has had a lot of buzz throughout award season since its premiere, but I find it hard to believe that an esoteric donkey drama will overtake an anti-war war film. Live action short film. The nominees are An Irish Goodbye, Ivalu, Les Pupilles, Night Ride, and The Red Suitcase. Well, it seems like inevitably, every year, one of the 3 shorts categories is a bit of a disappointment. And this year, that disappointment falls with the live action shorts. I only liked 2 of the shorts, and found the other 3 either underwhelming or bizarrely misguided. The 2 I did enjoy were An Irish Goodbye and The Red Suitcase, but I've got to give my personal pick to The Red Suitcase. It was a really compelling thriller, and one of the only shorts this year that I wouldn't mind seeing get the feature-length treatment. I don't think it's actually going to win, though, and it'll probably come down to either Les Pupilles or An Irish Goodbye. Les Pupilles' quirky charm and streaming distribution are tailor-made for the Academy, but I'm gonna give An Irish Goodbye the slight edge here. I think its blend of dark humor and emotion will win over the voters. Costume design. The nominees are Babylon, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Elvis, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Well, we've got some period pieces here, but thankfully no costume dramas. With that said, costume plays a pretty significant role in each of these nominated films, so I can definitely understand all of their nominations. I really adore the costumes in Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I have to give the slightest of edges to Elvis for my personal pick. There weren't quite as many costume changes as Everything Everywhere All at Once, but there were still a ton of them. And this film had the added difficulty of needing to recreate very well-known costumes that Elvis wore through a variety of different time periods. And it's for these same reasons that I think Elvis is actually going to win the Oscar as well. Original Screenplay. The nominees are The Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Fabelmans, Tar, and Triangle of Sadness. Although we do have one odd nominee here with Triangle of Sadness, I thought all the other screenplays were really strong, which certainly makes predictions tough here. For me personally, there were 2 films that stood out on this front as soon as I watched them, long before the nominees were ever announced. Everything Everywhere All at Once and The Banshees of Inisherin. I'm super torn on this decision, and they're essentially tied in my mind because I love them both for slightly different reasons, but I'm gonna go with Everything Everywhere All at Once for my personal pick. From a prediction standpoint, I think it's also gonna come down to these 2, though The Fabelmans might also be a bit of an outside contender. Just like with my personal pick, I think it's going to be a bit of a toss-up, but I'm also going to give the slight edge to Everything Everywhere All at Once for the win as well, but I would be perfectly happy with either of them winning. Adapted Screenplay. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Glass Onion: A Knives Out Mystery, Living, Top Gun: Maverick, and Women Talking. As usual, this is one of the tougher categories to predict because it's hard to tell how the voters are going to approach it. Are they going to select the best adaptation, or are they just going to select the best screenplay that happens to have been adapted? That gets even more complex this year, since 2 nominees gained their adapted status due to the fact that they're sequels based on existing IPs. One is a remake of a movie, and another is a readaptation of a novel that's already been made into a Best Picture winning movie, and then we've got one simply based on a book. Even though Glass Onion was my favorite film of these nominees, and even though I thought it had a great screenplay, I just can't get on board with the fact that it's considered adapted here. So my personal pick is going to All Quiet on the Western Front, which is certainly an adaptation. I think Women Talking might have a bit of an outside shot in this category, but I'm gonna go with All Quiet on the Western Front for the win as well. Original Score. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Babylon, The Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and The Fabelmans. The last couple years of original score nominees have been somewhat underwhelming to me, but I have to say that I like all five this year. They're all quite different, ranging from classic cinematic to atmospheric electronic to rambunctious jazz, but all of them are pretty strong. That said, I've got to go with Babylon for my personal pick, and also for my official prediction, too. I can't get that sax riff out of my head, and I'm willing to bet the Academy voters can't either. Film editing. The nominees are The Banshees of Inisherin, Elvis, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Tar, and Top Gun Maverick. Along with cinematography, film editing tends to be one of my favorite categories each year, and that certainly holds true this year. I do think there's an odd nominee or two here, but each of these films were well edited. However, only one of them stood out to me for its editing on the very first watch, not to mention each subsequent rewatch. Everything Everywhere All at Once is easily my personal pick here. And even though I think Elvis and Top Gun Maverick have a chance with this one, I think the Oscar's actually going to Everything Everywhere All at Once as well. Documentary feature. The nominees are All That Breathes, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, Fire of Love, A House Made of Splinters, and Navalny. Even though this never tends to be one of my favorite categories, I thought this year's nominees were pretty underwhelming, especially when compared to their short film counterparts. I did like Fire of Love and its odd volcanologist love story, but the only documentary I truly enjoyed this year was Navalny, earning it my personal pick. I'm a little stumped when it comes to the actual prediction, though. All the Beauty and the Bloodshed was on the hype train for a while, so I think it's got an outside shot, but it's probably going to come down to Fire of Love or Navalny. Any other time period, I'd probably predict Fire of Love, but I think I'm going to take a shot with Navalny here, largely due to its political timeliness. That said, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it went to any of the five nominees, because this seems to often be a pretty unpredictable category. Production design. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar, The Way of Water, Babylon, Elvis, and The Fabelmans. Much like a handful of other categories, production design tends to be one of those categories that really favors a particular type of film. And in this case, that's period pieces. Perhaps unsurprisingly, 4 of the 5 nominees are period pieces, so that makes things a little tough here. I think All Quiet on the Western Front, Babylon, and Elvis were all fairly strong on this front, but I'm gonna go with Babylon as my personal pick, if only for the detail and sheer number of props and sets. To be honest, I think the Oscar could go to any of those 3, but I'm leaning more towards a race between Babylon and Elvis. Elvis will probably take a few of the other technical categories, but I think this is one that Babylon was tailor-made for. Original song. The nominees are Applause from Tell It Like a Woman, Hold My Hand from Top Gun Maverick, Lift Me Up from Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Natu Natu from RRR, and This Is a Life from Everything Everywhere All at Once. Ah yes, probably the most frustrating of all the Oscar categories for me each year. Not necessarily because of the songs themselves, but because of the nomination criteria. It's just always bothered me that the closing credit songs can be nominated. We do have a few movies that incorporate the songs into the film itself, and one that uses the song 4 different times, an annual thanks again to Diane Warren, but still. Things were very pop-heavy this year, but I still thought 4 of the 5 songs were pretty decent. My personal pick has got to go to the incredibly catchy Natu Natu, though. For my actual prediction, I think Hold My Hand and Lift Me Up have a chance, but I'm getting a little risky here and predicting the win for Natu Natu as well. I think RRR probably deserved a nomination in a few other categories this year, and this might help Natu Natu secure a compensatory vote from Academy members who might not have otherwise voted for it. Directing. The nominees are Martin McDonagh for The Banshees of Inisherin, The Daniels for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Steven Spielberg for The Fabelmans, Todd Field for Tar, and Ruben Östlund for Triangle of Sadness. There are a couple unexpected nominees this year, but 2 of the nominees really stood out in a positive way for me. Or should I say 3? Martin McDonagh is a consistent favorite of mine, but I thought the Daniels were also really impressive this year, making their chaotic and creative vision something that could be understood. Much like original screenplay, these two were very close for me, but I've gotta go with the Daniels for my personal pick. Although I think Steven Spielberg will garner some votes for his semi-autobiographical tale, and the fact that he's Steven Spielberg, I think this one is basically going to be a two-way race between McDonagh and the Daniels, with the Daniel duo coming out with the Oscar. Actor in a leading role. The nominees are Austin Butler in Elvis, Colin Farrell in The Banshees of Inisherin, Brendan Fraser in The Whale, Paul Mescal in Aftersun, and Bill Nighy in Living. This is one of the easier personal picks for me, but one of the harder actual predictions. As much as I enjoyed almost all of these performances, only one instantly stood out to me as Oscar winning as I was watching the film, and that was Brendan Fraser in The Whale. Say what you will about the film as a whole, but his performance was phenomenal. I'm ready for the Renaissance, so Fraser is definitely my personal pick. As for the actual winner, I'm not quite as confident. He was my go-to prediction for a long time, but then Colin Farrell and Austin Butler crept into my prediction radar too. At this point, I think it's going to be a bit of a toss-up between Butler and Fraser, but I'm sticking with my initial gut reaction and saying Brendan Fraser is taking home that Oscar. Makeup and hairstyling. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, The Batman, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Elvis, and The Whale. This year's nominees run the makeup and hairstyling gamut, ranging from traditional hair and makeup to extensive prosthetics to realistic accentuation. I think all 5 nominees were pretty strong, but for me, it came down to Elvis and The Whale. The prosthetics used in The Whale are impressively transformative, but much like with the costume design, the sheer number of decades-spanning real looks that needed to be replicated in Elvis earn it my personal pick. And honestly, I'd be pretty surprised if it didn't actually win too. Actress in a leading role. The nominees are Cate Blanchett in Tar, Ana de Armas in Blonde, Andrea Riseborough in To Leslie, Michelle Williams in The Fabelmans, and Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once. This has certainly proven to be the most controversial category this year. Well, at least prior to the ceremony. Andrea Riseborough's atypical nomination will be a big part of the discussions of the 95th Academy Awards, but for me, this category is a two-woman race, Cate Blanchett and Michelle Yeoh. Blanchett gives a captivating powerhouse performance as Lydia Tarr, but I've got to give my personal pick to Michelle Yeoh for her funny and heartfelt performance in multiple Evelyn roles. I think the Oscar is also going to come down to these same 2 women, and although it could realistically go either way, I'm predicting a win for Michelle Yeoh. She is the Evelyn we're looking for. Best Picture. The nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: The Way of Water, The Banshees of Inisherin, Elvis, Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Fabelmans, Tar, Top Gun: Maverick, Triangle of Sadness, and Women Talking. Alright, the category everybody's been waiting for. After a collectively underwhelming set of nominees last year, I'm pleased to say that I genuinely liked all 10 of this year's nominees. It's been a few years since I've been able to say that, but I gave all of this year's nominees a 3.5 paw or higher rating when they first came out. For me, The Banshees of Inisherin and Everything Everywhere All at Once stand at the top of the pile. But with rewatches, I've got to give my personal pick to my favorite film of the year, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think about half of the nominees have at least some small shot at coming away with the Oscar, but I have a feeling this is really going to be Everything Everywhere All at Once's year, almost across the board. So I'm predicting it'll take Best Picture too. Alright, so there you have it. My picks and predictions for the 95th Academy Awards. These were just my thoughts on the likely outcome of this year's Oscars, but I'd love to hear what your predictions are too, so be sure to post them in the comments below. I've already reviewed some of these movies, so I've put links to those videos in the description below, and you can check those out if you want some more in-depth discussion of each, as well as my ratings, pros and cons, and even tailored film recommendations. And if you're interested in buying any of these Oscar-nominated movies, I do have affiliate links to all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. Also, be sure to check out my 23 category Oscar ranking series and come back after the Oscars to see how I did with my predictions in my final Oscar video of the year. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information on this video, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.